This isn't a picture of Horse Hill. This is a picture from where I live in Earlswood. This, for me, is what makes Surrey special. We aren't just towns, we're an amazing countryside in which we live. We're not classified here as an area of outstanding natural beauty, but I'm sure you'll agree with me that this is the countryside around our towns which makes Surrey special, and the threats are many and varied to that. It's large-scale housing development proposed on and around Redhill Aerodrome, sneaky behind-the-scenes second runway at Gatwick by saying we're going to run some extra planes on the emergency runway. And now we've got a proposal to increase the number of wells at Horse Hill, which will make it something like the second largest or most intense onshore oil production in the UK, which, all of that together, that's quite an industrialisation of our countryside, and I think we need to do something to make sure that this view is seen as a protected view. And likewise, the countryside around Horse Hill and around Hawley. I don't know if some of you received a note like this through your doors from Horse Hill Developments Limited. Apparently I'm maybe a mischievous and misleading rumour mongerer, according to them. So, let's just to introduce this meeting, go through some of the things which they're saying. And, well, first of all, they say that there's an environmental scoping report, which, yes, it was placed on Reigate and Mansfield website for their opinion. Whether it's supposed to be public or not, we don't know, but it was in the public domain. We thought it meant 4 wells, but they corrected us and said it's actually 4 plus 1. And the one extra one is where they want to inject the water back underground, which is, I think, one of the triggers or potential triggers for earthquakes. We've said it's bigger, they've confirmed it's bigger. There will be some noise. Maybe not a huge amount, but maybe a significant amount. And it's up to you, as local residents nearest the site, maybe to determine what significant is. In terms of HGV movements, HGV heavy goods vehicle movements along the road, they quoted a number and they've said this is a number of two-way movements. If you speak to Surrey County Council and Planning, a movement is one way. If you go 2 ways, that's 2 movements. So if you take the numbers they've quoted and double them, that's the number of movements. You can't say it's a 2-way movement. That's a movement. And the question is, what is a significant movement? Well, compared to the landfill site east of Redhill, which you may know, and if you don't, look on Google Earth and you'll see the size of the Biffa landfill site. There you're talking about 400 or 600 vehicle movements a day. So 32 maybe is not sound so much. But east of Redhill, we've got the A25, which is a big road. So the question again is, what's significant? And what's significant to the local area around that site? And the types of roads you have in that area. And significance? Again, I think that could something which we could consider at planning. Next, they say, we've quoted the idea that they do back-to-back wells. In their response on the facts, they've said back-to-back wells are more efficient. They haven't disputed the fact that we've mentioned they do back-to-back wells, they've effectively confirmed it. And what back-to-back wells means is traditionally you'd stick one well in the ground and it would be vertical and oil would then flow up. But because it's hard to get oil out, they stick one well down in one direction and then another one in another direction and so on, and they're proposing to do 2 plus 4 is 6, plus 1, but ignore the plus 1 because that's for water. So that's 6 wells, almost like in a spider going underground. No, that's wrong. It's a fly, it's only got 6 legs. It's a fly underground, and each of the legs goes out, if you like, in a slightly different direction. And that's what it does. And it's that fly pattern underground which is what's needed to get the oil out in a slightly more difficult environment. And rather than put one well down and expect that well to produce oil for a long time, they produce a series of wells, and it's those together which does the same work. Property prices. I don't know about property prices. Fracking, we've never said it's fracking. What we've said is it's unconventional oil extraction. What that means is that you can't just stick one oil well down and expect the oil to flow back up, which is why they're proposing 6 plus 1 wells, not 1. They've said that there will be 0 impact on groundwater or local waterways. They say that the stuff that's put down is water-based, non-toxic, biodegradable, zero hazard, drilling fluid. Well, they haven't actually told us what it is. So So we don't actually know what it is, but we know that it's okay and it's nice and it won't cause any damage. There'll be zero discharge. But if there's zero discharge, why are we building not just 4 wells, but 4 plus 1 wells to put all the water back and discharge it underground? Presumably with the water-based, non-toxic, biodegradable, zero-hazard drilling fluid, which may or may not be good in water. We don't know, because we don't know exactly what it is. Then they continue and they say that it is not, and they put not in capital letters, so it must be a very important word. It is not, this is the acid that's going down the well, the vinegar or the acetic acid, if you like, if you're a chemist. It's not forced into the well to artificially fracture the limestone. Well, we agree that the word forced is maybe being forced upon us. I don't think we've ever said it's being forced down the well. That's hydraulic fracturing, which is water under pressure. In this case, what's being proposed is to put acid, vinegar down a well, and it will flow. But I think that once it flows into the limestone, it will then react with the limestone. Those of you who've done GCSE or O-level, CSE, depending on looking around the room here, chemistry, you will know that if you put acid and limestone or something similar together, it will react and it will produce CO2? CO2, salt, perhaps water as well, something like that. Anyway, it produces gas underground, and that gas underground, under pressure, which has got more under pressure, it will want to expand and potentially artificially fracture the rocks. I mean, that's what you're putting acid down there for. It's an alternative way to cause a fracture than putting water down there under pressure. And finally, they talk about earthquakes. Well, penultimately, they talk about earthquakes. They say there was no activity during the majority of the tremors. Okay, so that's not quite the zero they talked about with water, is it? It's definitely not a zero. So I would reinterpret that as there's some activity during some of the tremors. But the tremors, the earthquakes, occurred not just in the vicinity of Horse Hill, they also occurred in the vicinity of Brockham. There are 2 active oil wells in the vicinity, both doing the same stage of exploration of oil before going into full production. And isn't it coincidental that in the period this year, when both of those wells are being investigated for the potential to flow oil at a productive rate, that there is a series of earthquakes for the first time in, well, I'm not old enough to remember the last ones anyway, but and I don't think anyone in this room is either. So it might not have been exactly at the same time as Horse Hill for all of them, but there are 2 oil wells. And in any case, is it sufficient to think that, no earthquakes for a long time and then suddenly some at the same time is a sufficient coincidence to be worried? Maybe more than the zero risk for water. I'll just finalise this introduction by going on and talking about their final statement in their supposed presentation of the facts from an oil company. The oil company said that we need more oil, that we forever need more oil. Well, the question is, what is need? So these are 2 complicated graphs from the recent International Panel on Climate Change special report on the implications of a 1.5 degree rather than 2 degrees global warming. And I see a few glazed eyes going over here, the room. We have a line. We're currently going for quite a lot more than that. If we aim for 2, then the scientists in Paris, 2015, said that sounds a good chance of avoiding runaway climate change, which would move us from a future of more disasters to a pretty catastrophic future. They were asked to investigate, and they reported this year on what if you set a target for 1.5 rather than 2 degrees? Would that be achievable? And they said yes. And they said, would that be safer? And they've said yes. And what they've said further is that really that is the only safe option. 2 degrees is borderline safe. And if we want a safe future for our children, we need to accept that lower target. And what that means is that in terms of carbon dioxide emissions, we're going up here. That 2020, they've said, we need to really start to tail back. And Those of you who are more familiar with graphs than I am will know that that is a steep curve going down. Actually, it's not a curve, it's a straight line. And it goes all the way down to zero around they said to reach net zero in 2055 or 2040. Okay? So we as a country have committed to reduce it to 80% lower than now by 2050. Well, that's a higher climate target than our government is setting. So that means we can't just continue to do the same as we're doing now. We need to change. And the problem we've got is this is the amount of oil and coal and gas that's on the stock market books of all the fossil fuel companies around the world. To avoid exceeding that 2-degree limit, this is how much of it we can burn. To avoid the 1.5-degree limit, this is how much we can burn. This is already discovered conventional oil, coal and gas. If we add to that and we put extra oil, coal and gas from unconventional sources such as Horse Hill, the chances of all of the other stuff remaining in the ground is going to be, I would say, somewhat less rather than somewhat more. I think someone says if you've got a problem with a hole, stop digging. If you need to stop digging out of one hole, why are you going to go off somewhere else and dig another hole instead? I don't think the planet recognises whether the oil is coming from the UK or from China or from Africa or the Middle East or whatever. We collectively need to work together as countries to create a different future, and that's our challenge. So, what if it's a big hoax and we create a better future for nothing, What if we create some energy independence, we preserve our forests, we have sustainability, we create green jobs by creating a better future in the UK rather than take the oil scare stories that somehow it's about oil jobs in the UK or oil jobs out of the UK? What if there is a different choice? What if we can focus those jobs on creating cycleways, on making our air cleaner, on having livable cities, on having zero risk to our water supply, like the Horse Hill development says? That's what I think we should be focusing on. I think there is another alternative. We don't have to accept all companies telling us that we need more oil when the climate scientists say that we can't even burn all the oil that we already have.